shared that you once wanted to be a sports writer, even writing a college column called Hooping It Up. But in a Giants locker room, one intimidating interview ended that dream on the spot. What was going through your head in that moment, and how did you move forward when you suddenly realized the path you thought you were on wasn't actually for you?
So that was the first time I was ever in a Major League Baseball locker room. I was a student at San Jose State, still had a press card from San Jose State, and had arranged to get access to the Giants locker room because it was San Jose State Day at Candlestick Park. And so I don't remember the details of the game. I think the Giants might have lost. And Jeff Leonard, their left fielder, had a not particularly good game. In fact, he may have been hitless and had a couple strikeouts. But I went over, and my name is Leonard Hoops, and I'm like, hey, Mr. Leonard, I'm Leonard Hoops. Would like to ask you a few questions for the San Jose State Spartan Daily. And he looked at me, and he says, who the F is this guy? And I was probably 19 or 20 and maybe looked 15 or 16, I don't know. And was already sort of intimidated to be in the locker room in the first place. And so he made it pretty clear he wasn't going to talk to me, and actually, I think, tried to get me removed from the locker room like I didn't have credentials, even though I did. And Mike Krukow, who pitched that day, waved me over, and he said, don't worry about that guy. He's kind of a jerk. And he then proceeded to give me a whole bunch of stuff about, hey, San Jose State Day, huh? Well, I couldn't sleep last night. It was like being a rookie all over again, etc. So, in some ways, that locker room experience was positive because Kruk was really good to me. And there were some other guys, I think Robbie Thompson, I got to interview him and, put together an article and all the rest of the stuff. But when I got in my car, a Toyota Tercel in 1982, slightly orange hatchback Toyota Tercel, and drove back from Candlestick to my apartment in downtown San Jose, it just hit me like, do I really want to do this on a daily basis? There's going to be plenty of guys like Jeff Leonard. Is this something that I'm cut out to do? And what I came to kind of realize was I was really interested in the attending and the writing, but not the kind of player interaction that you really have to do that well.
For students or young professionals, there's often a fear of, what if I go spend 4 years chasing a degree only to realize it's not what I actually wanted? How do you accept that without feeling like all that time was wasted? And how do you find the confidence to pivot like you did?
Really good question. I don't know that I've ever been asked that. The journalism degree, like a lot of kids, when I got ready to go to college, I had no idea really what I wanted to do. I had done some stand-up comedy in high school, and a lot of my friends thought, hey, you ought to move to like New York or to L.A. and try your hand in that world. And I mean, I'm 17 years old and have no clue and no confidence to do that, even though I thought it was pretty funny. And so I started looking at state schools, and I saw that San Jose State had this. It just hit me like when I was getting ready to apply for schools that, hey, maybe sports writer. And so that moment, I didn't necessarily feel like the journalism degree was going to be worth it, or that it wasn't going to get me anywhere. I just kind of was like, what else can I do with this? So I started immediately asking around, and I really hadn't thought about a career in public relations or corporate communications. And a lot of people were like, hey, PR, there's a lot of jobs in the corporate world. You can, and I started also thinking at that point before I graduated from undergrad, maybe I'll get an MBA. And so I immediately started looking into that, and I was like, oh, what are the big companies in the Bay Area where they would pay for your MBA? Mm-hmm. And I ended up finding a job at a job fair for a corporate communications job for what was then a Fortune 120 company called FMC Corp. And they had a tuition reimbursement program and all that. But, going back to the core nut of that question, I didn't feel like not being a sports writer meant that I had wasted my time in that degree. I just felt that there had to be other things I could apply that to, and it turned out that I could. And then damned if you don't wind up with a job, years later where you still attend sporting events and you go with clients and things like that instead of being in the locker room.
When you are making that pivot like you did, saying, okay, I'm going to go get my MBA, find a company who will pay for it. If someone is trying to make that career path, how do they know which direction to move towards? Was it a deliberate choice, or did you just stumble into that path that became your career?
I have been one of those guys for all of my adult life, at least that I can think of, where I didn't want to do something that I felt wasn't going to make me happy. And so anytime I kind of hit a inflection point, a crossroads, where I thought, hey, I could do this and it would be the safe route, even though, the sports writing relative to trying comedy or something like that was definitely a safer route. It wasn't a, completely safe route. I wasn't going to be a management trainee at a company I didn't want to work for and that sort of thing. So I always kept thinking to myself, if your heart's not into it, then don't do it. And with the FMC job, in fact, when I got the MBA, they offered me a 6-year management training program. In FMC terminology, it was called high potential. And they often kind of plucked out people who had just gone to grad school on their dime and while they were working full time and all that. And they were like, hey, you're going to go to Anniston, Alabama for 2 years, and you're going to work in operations and assist the operations director and learn everything about ops. Then you're going to go to Aiken, South Carolina, and you're going to work for the finance director and learn everything about what it's like to, run the finances and the books for a division. And then you're going to go to Fridley, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. I can still remember the kind of map they plotted out for me. And you're going to be in like a corporate intelligence, corporate planning, corporate marketing. And my now wife was my human resources manager at the time. And I told her I wasn't going to take it after I had been offered this. And she was like dumbfounded. She was like, nobody turns this down. And I was like, well, I don't think I'll enjoy this. I mean, it sounds okay, but that's like 730 days of working in operations, 2 years of that. It's not that long. Oh, it's long to me, especially when you add them all up. So back in the day, I'm old enough that you would then find a job by looking in the Sunday newspaper. Like that would be unheard of to an IU student today. But that's where they were all listed. There was no, Indeed or whatever, or LinkedIn, these sorts of things that you might find these opportunities. And I saw a want ad for the Director of Public Relations, San Jose Convention and Visitors Bureau. I had no idea what that was. Websites didn't exist, so I couldn't even look it up like that. And I had to kind of check with my network to figure out what that was. But long story short, going back to kind of the core of the question there is that, my personal decisions have always been kind of based on, will I be happier doing X or Y? And that's usually the path that I would then take. And then sometimes it wound up being a really good decision. And if it didn't seem like it early on, then I would pivot as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. And now Visit Indy has grown into a $6 billion convention and tourism business under your leadership. And Indianapolis has been named the #1 convention city in America. How do you take a city that might be overlooked and make it stand out against places like Las Vegas or Orlando or these other big cities?
Yeah, that's sometimes being in the right place at the right time. I mean, I came to Indy in 2005 as a visitor as part of a Sacramento Chamber of Commerce study mission. I was working for Visit Sacramento at the time, and I was part of the delegation that the Chamber had brought here. And it was my first visit to Indy, and all I knew of Indy at that point was the 500 and the Pacers and the Colts. All sports stuff. And I was amazed, honestly, when I first stepped foot downtown at that point, Gainbridge was only, I think, 6 years old. They were under construction with Lucas. They had just torn down the RCA Dome and were converting that into expansion of the convention center because Lucas was already under construction a little further down the street. And Georgia Street was being worked on, and we took a trip to the zoo in White River State Park, and I was like, well, these guys have a real vision. At the time, the mall was kind of thriving. It still had a Nordstrom, and it still had a Carson Pirie and all this other stuff. So it was the mall and the connectivity to the hotels, et cetera, and I just saw a city that I felt being overlooked as a convention city because that was the business I was in. And that it had great potential, untapped potential. And so, fast forward 6 years later, I'm in San Francisco. I've left Sacramento for San Francisco, and a recruiter calls me about the CEO job here, and I immediately went back to, in my mind, that experience that I had in 2005, and I did feel that it was overlooked, but it had potential beyond where it was. And so that was kind of number one for me, is like, I think I can help move the needle on this thing.
Mm-hmm. And then what's the pitch that you give to people who have never been to Indy? And then how can business leaders or group leaders in student forums use that same structure in their own way?
So I think the starting point for us was figuring out a brand strategy. When I got here, we were the Indianapolis Convention and Visitors Association, and our tagline was raising the game, which on the surface makes sense. It's not a bad tagline, but I have my own litmus test for a tagline, and it is, if it stands alone, do you know where the place is when it comes to destination marketing? So if you take away Indianapolis or ICVA and it just says raising the game, would anybody know that's Indy and nobody else? And I would say the answer was no. Detroit could have been that, Milwaukee could have been that, Cleveland, any kind of rising city. And so we did some focus groups. We spent the next year, made some changes, hired promoted a guy internally, Chris Gall, to be our CMO. He's now our CMO. He was promoted him to a VP of marketing at the time, and went off and had folks in Columbus, Ohio, and Chicago, and Champaign-Urbana, and Fort Wayne, and Louisville, and a few other places give us feedback on what does Indianapolis mean to them. When they think Indy, what does it mean? What are some good things? What are some bad things? And we tested some taglines, and none of the taglines completely resonated. The one that seemed to resonate the best was, I think, take the checkered flag, because while it was racing-oriented, the checkered flag means a lot of things. It means winning. It means competing. It means getting to your destination. You think about like a GPS, and there's a checkered flag often wherever you're trying to get to. But what I found after looking at tape of a couple of days' worth of focus groups was every time somebody said something negative or neutral about us, they called us by our full name. Hey, the winters in Indianapolis, not so great. I feel like there's too many chain restaurants in Indianapolis. Sometimes people who don't like, the left side of politics were like, oh, it's a liberal city. I don't like that about Indianapolis. Or if they don't like the red side or the conservative side, they were like, oh, I don't like Indianapolis, Indiana's politics because it's the state capital, et cetera. And so, you're always ticking off half the people about something on that. But the point was, every time somebody thought negative or neutral, it was Indianapolis. Every time they had something good to say about us, it was like, oh, the people in Indy are really friendly. And you know what? There's way more like individual, one-off independent restaurants in Indy than people think. Oh, and I love the connectivity. You can get through skywalks, so it's really weatherproof in the winter. And it was Indy. And you see that like when you see like sportscasters with the Super Bowl or an NBA Finals or whatever, they refer to us as Indy typically. Mm-hmm. And so we just came to the conclusion that Indy was going to be the most malleable brand, and nobody else could be that. Minneapolis can't be Indy. Cleveland can't be Indy. Louisville can't be Indy. And so we started with that premise, and then we sell Indy in different ways to different folks. But at the end of the day, the map says Indianapolis, but our friends call us Indy.
And then in Indy, with the Final Fours, the NBA All-Star Games, how do you measure the true impact of these events, beyond just the revenue that they bring in, but in terms of Indy's reputation and long-term growth?
Yeah, the first and foremost, we always try to get the immediate economic impact, right? How much did people spend when they came here? End of story, and that's the primary driver. But if you were to figure out the net present value, and it's really difficult to measure because you can't always trace the lines from, because you got some publicity for an NBA Finals or a Final Four or a Super Bowl or whatever, that may have led somebody to rethink about maybe coming out to school here, maybe having a business here, maybe wanting to live here or look for an opportunity here. You can't always know if maybe somebody that elevated the brand to the point to where a convention meeting planner in Washington, D.C. saw that, hey, the Giants played the Patriots in the Super Bowl, and that was in Indy. Oh, interesting. They said some really nice things about it. And the next time our sales team is in D.C. pitching that convention, did that, in fact, make that person go, oh, I just saw you on the Super Bowl, and if you can host a Super Bowl, you can obviously host my convention. That's the biggest, sporting event in the world outside of maybe an Olympics or an Indy 500 in terms of size, at least. And so, so I think that the beauty of these bigger events is they have a benefit that goes well beyond the single day or single week economic impact of them. They have a lasting effect that can both elevate brand and have very tangible decisions made by people about wanting to go to school here, wanting to move here, wanting to look for a job here, wanting to live here, whatever the case is.
And then Visit Indy has been recognized as Indiana's best place to work nearly a decade in a row. Mm-hmm. What does it take to build a culture where people actually want to come to work every single day?
It's actually up to 10 years in a row now. We just got it again, and I need to update my bio on the website. But so 10 years in a row now, we have been one of the organizations, and I think we're the only nonprofit that's been 10 years in a row in the state. And internally, I have a philosophy that I call the 3 Ps, and I created it when I was with the San Jose Convention and Visitors Bureau, I think in 1999, because I had just been promoted to a senior VP there. I'd gone from a director of PR to a VP of marketing to a senior VP of marketing. Classic fake it till you make it. I was 34 years old, but I had a lot of theories as to what we should do to get the most out of our workforce. And the 3 Ps basically are productive, positive, and progressive. The first P is pretty much how we were measuring our employees 100%. It's kind of your job description. So if Keegan's job is to be the senior manager of sales for the sports market and the convention side, you're going to be evaluated on how many room nights did you book and how many leads did you generate and some things like that. And that's all we evaluated on. Now, the positive is basically what kind of positive energy do you bring to the team? Are you a good teammate? So I had salespeople who would hit goal, and nobody wanted to work with them internally because they were jerks. And at the end of the day, that can be just undermine the overall culture of your organization. Having 1 or 2 bad apples in that barrel sometimes affects the whole barrel. And so we started evaluating people on that as well. We had you literally will have some level of score about, are you a good teammate? And the litmus test on that particular one is, let's say Keegan walks into a room. Do you bring energy to the room, or do you suck it out of the room? We all kind of know people. If you're a student and you get assigned a project and you've got like 5 or 6 other people on that project with you, it's not unusual for that project team to have a mix of people who are like, yeah, Keegan's here, or Keegan's here. All right, so we've all been on those teams where people either pull their weight or don't, or they add positive energy to the team, or they suck it out. The third P is progressive, and the whole idea of progressive simply means can you innovate and can you adapt to change? And so there's a lot of people who are kind of good at their core job, but when it's time to change, they can't break free of that, or they're not always thinking, how can I do this better, or how can the organization be better? And the thought there with an organization like Visit Indy, which is nearly 60 people, if you've got 60 people who are all thinking about innovation and who are all embracing, hey, AI, I don't know anything about it, but I'm going to learn it. I'm going to learn how it's to my benefit and to my advantage, and how it's going to make Visit Indy better, my individual job better, etc. Or you can resist it, and that's not going to help any of us. So to me, a great workplace culture is what I call a team of complete 3 people. Everybody demonstrates the 3 Ps. The first one is about the competency of your core job. The second one is, are you a good teammate? Do people want to work with you? Can you be a good member of teams? And then the third one is, if we're all innovating, we're all adapting to change, we're going to gain market share on somebody.
Let's say I get into a group project and then I notice the people around me sigh, say, Keegan's with us. What are the practical steps I can take to change that energy and change that narrative?
Really good question. I think you've asked me a couple now that I don't recall ever being asked before. Because I think most people just assume they're the positive energy to the team, and the other guy or the other gal is the one sucking it out of the room. That's a good question. I think you would have to find, if you sense that, I think you just have to have an honest conversation with your teammates and say, hey, I once heard this guy on a podcast about positive energy, and I don't think I'm that in this team. Is that the case? Am I wrong in thinking that? And if I'm right in thinking that, tell me why you feel that way and how I could be better about it. But I think that would require an honest conversation. Most of the time, like I do the final interview of every full-time employee here, and every so often I'll get a final candidate that the department, the hiring manager or the whole department's recommending. I'm like, I don't think that person's 3P. I feel like they were lacking either on the second one or the third one. Usually the first P is no problem, because you don't get to a final interview if you haven't demonstrated competency to the core job. But those other 2 are really important, especially if you want 50. And you can, that doesn't mean you're not going to have people who think differently, who are diverse in all sorts of ways, because there's many ways to be positive energy for your team, and there's many ways to show that you are innovative and can adapt to change.
Mm-hmm. And then for young people, specifically students who might be listening and are unsure of their path, what's the one piece of advice you would give them?
Great question again. I typically tell people that, life is a series of countless, meaningless, immaterial decisions and a handful of incredibly important inflection points. So you get up and you're like, what am I going to have for breakfast? What pants am I going to wear today? Does this shirt go with that? Then you get to lunch. What am I going to have for lunch? Maybe I'll, I pick Panera, but do I want the soup or do I want the sandwich or do I want the half and half? And at the end of the day, none of those, most of the time, don't make any difference unless you, contract botulism and die. Then that would be inflection point. But most of the time, it's not going to be, right? But every so often, you meet somebody that may be your significant other, and that is going to be a life changer. You pick a major that you find one semester in is not right for you. That could be a life changer if you stick with it, and you basically set off on a path of miserableness, or you make the decision like I'm going to cut my losses ASAP. So I would just say I often tell people identify if something as you haven't figured out your path. If you are potentially at an inflection point, is this a material or immaterial decision? If it's a material one where it could be an inflection point and move you in a completely different direction for good or bad, then identify that and make a call. If you know that's an inflection point, you got to do something about it.
And then looking ahead, when people think Leonard Hoops and Indy 20 years from now, what do you think? What do you hope they'll say your thumbprint was?
Well, they'll probably always remember my name because we're a basketball state, but and that was good to come into it in the first place. But I guess it's some variation of the universal leave a place better than you found it. And when I got here in 2011, the first thing I wanted to do was, try to really move the needle on the amount of business we could book with what we already had. And one of the key metrics we measure is contracted hotel room nights. So when like Gen Con's in town, they will sign contracts for a certain number of hotels for a certain amount of hotel rooms. And prior to my arrival, we were in the 600s, and now we're in the 900s with the same product. We're about to expand again, but we increased that about 50% in that time. And so, there's like really quantitative things I feel that people will be back and be like, oh, wow, we really grew there. And there's like actual numerical proof. But most of the time, what you're really, with a legacy, I start thinking about that now, I'm 60 years old. I've been here for 14 years. I've been in this industry for over 30. And it's typically just some sort of gut feeling. It's like, speed round word association. Leonard Hoops, what does that mean to you? And I hope what that will trigger in somebody is like, man, we really became something special in those years he was here, and he had a hand in it. And I'm the type of job you have when you're the CEO of Visit Indy it's a catalyst job. You clearly are not doing anything by yourself. I've got 60 people here. I've got a tourism workforce of 83,000 people in central Indiana. I depend on mayors and governors and city council presidents and individual developers and business owners of restaurants and hotels. Visit Indy sells everything and controls nothing. And so it's kind of the ultimate job of persuasion. Convince the customer they want to be here, convince the business partner and the government that we're booking the right business, convince your teammates at Visit Indy that they are passionate for this job and they want to work with you and make this special. So I think I would want somebody 20 years from now to feel like I remember Leonard Hoops, and we wouldn't be the Indy that I love today without him playing some role in that.
To wrap up the podcast, I'd like to just do a couple rapid fire questions. So what is one book you recommend everyone read before graduation?
Before graduation, shoot. Well, I'm going to give you one book that I would say is a great business book, and at least from my perspective, and then just one recent book I enjoyed for just pure fun of it. So Freakonomics, I think, really opened my eyes to the way the world works. It's if somebody hasn't read it before, just look it up. But it basically points out that how we are measured, motivated, rewarded drives behavior. If you tell a teacher that their salary is tied to the grades of their students, they often start teaching to the test. If you tell a realtor that they're only going to get a 3% commission on selling somebody else's house versus selling their own house, they're going to jump on you to drop the price as soon as possible, because let's say you drop the price $100,000, you lose $3,000, but if you drop the price $100,000 on your own home, you lose $100,000. So the point being is Freakonomics gives you some really good examples of how to understand how people work, and if you understand how people work, it's almost a psychology book. It really helps you in every kind of aspect of business, I think. The book I read recently just for funds is Project Hail Mary, which is by a guy named Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian. And it's a movie coming out in March of 2026 with Ryan Gosling. And to me, I love a science fiction movie that is based on science. Mm-hmm. And, kind of speculating what could happen. And it is not necessarily about like alien beasts bursting out of your chest. So
if you weren't leading Visit Indy, what would you want to be doing?
Well, if I had the talent for it, I would be a professional athlete. I would love to be a Major League Baseball player, a professional golfer. Those would probably be the two that if I had the talent, that I would sign up for right now. If I had the money for it, if somehow I'd come into the money, I would be a team owner. I think it would be really fun to be a team, and I may be one of those meddling owners in the sense that I would want to be the general manager and owner, and because I love that aspect of it. And maybe last, as another option, is I probably would enjoy being doing TV, or like being a late night TV host. I think would be fun, or maybe not these days. These days, maybe late night TV is not the right one, but in some way, some sort of host like that.
And then favorite indie restaurant to take out of town guest.
Oh boy, well that's a tough one to answer when you do my job, because you got friends at Hughes Culinary and Cunningham Restaurants and so many more. So I will give two. To shout out to two of my board members. If you want a classic, you got to take them to Elmo. And in fact, so many people, they've heard about the shrimp cocktail, and there's nothing more fun than somebody who's a San Elmo shrimp cocktail virgin and has never experienced what that horseradish can do to you, and you don't really tell them much about it, and you get to witness it firsthand. If you are looking for, maybe more of a kind of relatively new on the scene in the last 10, 20 years, I personally like Vita, just up New York Street. It's fantastic, chef-driven menu. But there's several others. I mean, I'm not going to answer your question by saying this, but I love Bluebeard. I like Livery. I live on Mass Ave, so I have a whole lot of only in Indianapolis types of restaurants, only in Indy restaurants that I have access to in walking distance.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.